Animation historian Jerry Beck has called him the last great Hollywood cartoon character. He's been a TV and theatrical mainstay for over 5 decades. He's been hired, so to speak, as a pitchman for a number of products and brands. And he even has an Academy Award. Not bad for a character that was never even originally intended to be anything more than a cute joke in the opening credits of a live-action movie. Director Blake Edwards was simply looking to spruce up the opening of his 1963 jewel heist comedy caper when he decided to add in an animated opening credit sequence. Going off the title of the movie, Edwards' script quickly informs viewers that the titular diamond that would serve as the film's MacGuffin is so named because of a small imperfection. When one looks deep into the stone, they can see a tiny discoloration resembling a leaping panther. One camera zoom in later, and movie audiences were treated to their first ever encounter with the now iconic character, the Pink Panther. Wanting the opening credit sequence to hopefully be as memorable as the rest of the film, Edwards turned to no less than an animation legend, Friz Freleng, to conceptualize and direct the sequence. Freleng was already a notable cartoon rock star. As one of the primary animators and directors of Warner Bros. Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes, he had helped develop some of the studio's biggest characters, such as Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, Sylvester and Tweety, and Speedy Gonzales. So it's no surprise his work on this new character for Edwards' film, especially when matched up with an instantly iconic theme by the great composer Henry Mancini, was immediately recognized as having more potential value than just a fun bit for this particular movie. Instead, United Artists, the studio behind the Pink Panther, immediately hired Freleng and his recently formed Freleng De Pardue Enterprises studio to create a theatrical short film starring the Pink Panther character. Remember me? First I was a movie title, now I'm a movie star. Thus read the poster of 1964's The Pink Fink, the first theatrical short to star the Pink Panther. The short also introduced the character of the Little Man, who would go on to become the animated feline's primary antagonist. In this first short, the Pink Panther consistently thwarts the little man's attempts to paint his house blue, instead attempting himself to paint the house, well, naturally, pink. Once again aided by Mancini's excellent theme, the short proved immensely popular, winning the Academy Award for Best Animated Short at the 37th Academy Awards. Subsequent theatrical shorts throughout the 60s and 70s would continue to be successful. All in all, the Pink Panther would end up starring in 92 theatrical shorts. Though, interestingly enough, he would only speak in 2 of them, 1965's Sink Pink and Pink Ice, both times voiced by Rich Little, who modeled the Panther's voice on David Niven, the star of the original Pink Panther feature film. The Pink Panther cartoons would also eventually find their way to television, where they were given a laugh track, a narrator, and presented as the Pink Panther Show on NBC's Saturday mornings. The success of the character and the shorts bearing his name would even lead to a number of other Freleng De Pardue characters and series, such as the Ant and the Aardvark, Roland and Ratfink, and Tijuana Toads. Perhaps the best-known Pink Panther character to receive his own spin-off series was the Inspector, a bumbling animated detective quite clearly modeled after the Inspector Clouseau character, played by Peter Sellers in the live-action Pink Panther feature film franchise, which the Pink Panther animated character officially became a mainstay mascot of when Edwards restarted the series in 1975 with the return of the Pink Panther. While the Panther had not featured in the first sequel, A Shot in the Dark, from 1975 on, audiences could expect to see him once again up to his animated hijinks in the opening credits of every remaining Pink Panther film. While at the same time, the character's popularity continued to grow in several permutations of his Saturday morning show, primetime TV specials, comic books, board games, video games, and more. So ubiquitous was the character that he even started to be used as a mascot for similarly pink products, such as fiberglass insulation from Owens Corning and Sweet and Low artificial sweetener, which was distributed in pink packets, and which teamed the Pink Panther up with Regis Philbin for one memorable TV commercial. All said, it's arguable that the animated Pink Panther, originally envisioned as just an extra gag in an otherwise live-action movie, has gone on to have even more of a pop culture imprint than the live-action series that bears his name, and certainly more impact than that series' sole entry of the 90s, which once again brought back the Panther for the credits, even as it lost the other star audiences had come to associate the franchise with. The year is 1993, and MGM and United Artists are ready to relaunch one of the most successful comedy franchises of all time, without its original iconic leading man, but perhaps with a newly emerging comedic star, with the son of the Pink Panther. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. I typically do an intro joke or a pun here, but today, Trev, I'm just too dumb to think of anything good.
All right, so this is the... I'm just going to bypass that. At least, you know what, at least you saved me the trouble of going to the old standby of doing the joke of what does the Pink Panther say when he steps on an ant?
Oh, yes.
Yes, dead ant. Okay, we can just forget about that now, thankfully.
Yeah.
But as people might have guessed from that amazing comedy up front here, we're actually looking at a part of a larger franchise today, which we do sometimes. We'll explain why that is. One of the kind of most famous comedy franchises of all time. And that is in the second installment of our Summer Surprise series. So this is a movie that was on our list, but I don't know that we would have necessarily got to it anytime soon if not for the computer telling us, hey, you guys, it is time to look at 1993's Son of the Pink Panther. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this film?
Sure. It is directed by Blake Edwards. He actually directed most of the Pink Panther franchise from 1963 to 1993.
Very famous comedy director. We'll talk a little bit more about him, I'm sure. This is actually his last movie.
Yes. It is written by Blake Edwards, Madeline Sunshine, and Steven Sunshine. They are both writers and executive producers on the little TV show known as Webster. The budget...
Little TV show? Okay, Chris.
Oh, I didn't... I don't know if I even meant that, but okay. The budget for this film is $28 million. In its release in the States and Canada, it grossed $2.4 million. However, it was a big hit in Italy, grossing $18 million and was the highest grossing Italian blockbuster ever for the time. And it's the lowest grosser for the franchise. The Pink Panther in general is MGM's longest and most successful comedy franchise.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't know it from hearing some of that, but that dichotomy is very strange to hear that this is the lowest grossing of the series, but also one of the highest grossing Italian blockbusters. And that is entirely due to the leading man, Roberto Benigni. We'll have more to say about him later, but that you can pretty much chalk the entire Italian success of this up to that, I would believe.
Definitely.
But I guess, obviously, if we're going to talk about Son of the Pink Panther... Now, let me just clarify for people wondering again, how does this fit into our general theme? Isn't this supposed to be failed franchise starters, and this was already a franchise? Yes, but as we've talked about before, and we've done some before, including our last episode, Men in Black International, sometimes we like to look at movies that are attempts to reboot and relaunch a long-running franchise. And also, honestly, we could have done this with 1983's Curse of the Pink Panther, which was kind of a similar attempt to move the series to like a new lead character. The reason, and maybe we still will, maybe we will in like year 17 of this podcast. We'll have to get back to Curse of the Pink Panther. The reason I think Son of the Pink Panther makes more sense is Curse feels a little bit to me more attached to the original series. Like it's like kind of like a postscript to that.
Right.
There was like a longer gap in between, and this really felt like more of a concerted effort to really start anew, kind of move this into a new direction with an entirely kind of new lead character, a new I don't know. It just does that make sense to you? Do you agree with that? No. Just from what you know about the series, and I know more about the series, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But this feels more individual to me than Curse of the Pink Panther does.
Well, MGM had even announced, like, when this movie was going into production, being like, we want to make more with Roberto Benini. So it's this one was absolutely meant to become kind of a continuation, sure, but definitely off the beaten path with a truly brand new character.
This is really like, it's kind of interesting to look at it today because people weren't throwing this term around back then, but this is a 1993 movie, but this is very much a legacy sequel.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
you're
right. It brings back numerous characters from the original series, but all in the service of trying to move into a new main character and a new kind of direction. So I guess we should talk about the Pink Panther franchise overall in general, because
if we're going to discuss this movie, I don't think you can without kind of discussing it into how it fits into the overall picture. And this is, before we get into how we each feel about it, I just want to briefly say, and I wonder if you agree, Chris, just from what you've been reading and what you've looked into, Pink Panther as like a media entity is really one of the weirdest franchises
Very.
in like pop culture history. Not only for like what the history of the movie is, but also because when you just say Pink Panther today, there's really two different things people might think about. They might think about the movie series we're about to discuss, or they might think about the kind of titular cartoon character who I think it's sometimes forgotten came from these movies. Like, I think some people, especially maybe younger people, just think the Pink Panther is like a Bugs Bunny or a Mickey Mouse that's always been around. But no, the Pink Panther was created for just an animated opening credit sequence of the original film, and then spun off into his own kind of media empire. And of course, noted fiberglass insulation pitchman. But but yeah, so it's interesting that even like this has gone off in two separate directions. But let's just talk about the Pink Panther movie series in general. Now, you don't have as much experience with it as I do, correct?
Correct. And actually, just before we jump into that, I'm glad you brought up the cartoon, because I'm a tad younger than you.
Yeah.
So my feelings towards this series are primarily directed at the cartoon that lasted from 93 to 95. I used to watch that show every Saturday morning. Like, I loved that show. And you're so right by saying it kind of like a Bugs Bunny bedfellow, you know? Because that's how it felt. It felt like watching a Looney Tunes show. And also, it's funny you mentioned the insulation thing, because I used to do drywall. And I remember taking naps in the warehouse on top of Pink Panther insulation. So.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if that's still, I'm not sure if that's like Pink Panther is still connected to any like insulation, but that was definitely, I remember just seeing him in hardware stores all the time as a kid. Because of course that's where kids hang out, is the hardware store.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, the Pink Panther like movie franchise is one that I love, and you are aware of this with me. In fact, I think you remember just like a year or so ago, I rewatched most of this series, which you know because you're always monitoring my Letterboxd reviews to yell at me about my various views on films. But yeah, I've rewatched the entire series, but it's also just a series I very much grew up with. This was one of those like series my dad was really into, so he got me really into it. And I can briefly here in a moment talk about, I can give like the general kind of history of not only the series, but just how weird the series is. But I did want to just briefly ask you, you already kind of answered and said you're not as familiar with it, but I am curious, and you didn't want to tell me until we recorded, is this Son of the Pink Panther your first Pink Panther movie ever, or have you seen at least like the Steve Martin films?
This is the first one I've seen in its entirety.
Okay.
I'm obviously aware of the series, through just pop culture and being, into film. But I may have seen most of one of them in my youth played on TV. Like it's kind of, I'm so, this is what's interesting about this episode is that I am very, very far removed from this franchise.
Yeah.
Like I said, cartoons and insulation. Okay. Trev knows these movies inside and out. So we really thought this was going to be a fun discussion to see where we land on Son of the Pink Panther. But yeah, Trev is the, I guess, self-proclaimed Pink Panther prophet.
I mean, between the two of us, sure. I wouldn't dare to call myself, a Pink Panther scholar or anything, but I certainly am a big fan. I do own the series on DVD, or at least the majority of the good ones. And I did see this one in the theater when it came out. I was 13 when it came out. I remember going to see it with my parents, being fairly excited because it didn't. Before we talk about how we feel about it, just like, oh, this might be cool. We've watched other ones on cable a lot. That's kind of exciting that they're doing this thing with like Clouseau's son. I definitely remember going into it being very, very aware of what it was, right, what they're trying to do, and not really knowing anything about Roberto Benigni. So that like kind of excitement of, is this like a new like comic star? Like, is this going to be, are we seeing a new Peter Sellers? And of course, it's a good thing we brought that name finally, because Peter Sellers is of course the shining star of this series. Yeah. So let's just briefly talk about this series. I won't go, I'm not going to make this like an hour-long treatise or anything on this, but I think it is worth saying, just because it is such an odd franchise, and this is a show about franchises, because this honestly was always meant to be a franchise, but it was never intended to be the franchise it became.
Yes.
And I think that's the very unique thing about it. And I know you've done some research. You did your due diligence, and you at least looked into some of this history before recording. So you can chime in on some of this as well, even though you haven't seen them. I'd just like to maybe hear what you think about, what you understand, how interested any of this makes you, or if you just think it's too weird to even jump into now.
Yeah, no, I definitely did. I definitely did my homework, because I texted Trev a few days ago, being like, I don't want to seem inept on this, like, and just let Trev monologue like his Letterboxd reviews. But I just I wanted to at least be able to chime in when I can. And you actually brought this up to me even in one of the earlier episodes. I think maybe during our Mordecai episode.
Because we definitely compared Mordecai to this for obvious reasons.
Yes. Yeah. But you were saying that the original Pink Panther movie was never about Inspector Clouseau. It was about the thief played by David Niven.
The Phantom, yes.
The Phantom. And it's funny because while they were shooting the movie, it became more and more clear that Peter Sellers was stealing every single scene he's in. And we have talked about this a bunch in our podcast about how supporting players being bumped up to leads are usually a detriment to the franchises. But in this case, it seems to have been the reason why it was so successful. The reason why you keep coming back. The reason why people just loved and adored this thing is because of Blake Edwards' direction mixed with Peter Sellers' just overall charming buffoonery.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Peter Sellers wasn't even. I mean, it's like a two-pronged thing, because not only was it not supposed to be about Clouseau, but Peter Sellers wasn't even supposed to be Clouseau.
Right.
Peter Ustinov had been cast, and he had to drop out, and Peter Sellers was really like a last-minute replacement. And the story always goes that when Blake Edwards went to pick up Peter Sellers at the airport to like bring him to like where they're doing like the pre-production, which was at that point they were very close to filming. They started talking and just realized they had a shared sense of humor. In particular, they were both very attracted to like very silly kind of, slapstick kind of humor and just broad humor. And so they decided to like, well, let's do that with Clouseau. Let's kind of improvise your scenes. And on the set, that started to really overtake everything. And I've even heard stories about how David Niven was kind of getting, clearly a little bit bothered on the set because he could see what was meant to be a franchise built around him being stolen away from him, because the crew was even like, oh man, this Clouseau character, this is great. And when the movie came out, even though he's only in a handful of scenes, those were the signature scenes that everyone remembered, and he was definitely the breakout character. And so that kind of leads into the next one, which was, this is where things already start to get weird.
Yeah.
Because the next film, which many, including arguably me, I think I kind of go back and forth in this, but a lot of people consider the next film to be the best in the series, and that is A Shot in the Dark. One of the only ones in the series that doesn't have Pink Panther in the title, and that's because A Shot in the Dark was actually a pre-existing murder mystery comedy play that Peter Sellers was attached to the film version, and he was starting to like kind of doubt the script. He wasn't very happy with it. He wasn't sure he wanted to do it, and he said, well, I'll only do it if Blake Edwards comes in to direct it, because I just worked with him on Pink Panther. We really got along famously at this point. And he wanted his kind of partner to come back again. And Blake Edwards looked at the script and said, I could see how this could work, but I'll only do this if they allow us to change that character into Clouseau, if we can use Clouseau again. And the studio had no problem with that because of how much money Pink Panther had made.
Yeah.
And so A Shot in the Dark was turned into the second Clouseau movie. And this is really the one, like Clouseau is now front and center. And this is the one where Peter Sellers really starts to develop the Clouseau character more. Like a lot of what we think of as Clouseau really gets kind of refined in this movie. And it's just, because it was a pre-existing story that they just kind of like ram him into, it works really, really well. I think that's why it's so strong, because you have this like framework that already existed, and then it's like this buffoon like wandering into this pre-existing story. It just works out perfectly.
And it's funny that it sounds like most fans say that this one is the best one of the franchise, because this is the one that really put a spotlight on Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers' relationship, professionally and personally. The relationship is kind of considered to be very fruitful, yet extremely complicated, because the disagreements they had on this film actually caused them not to work together on the next one. So that's the interesting part, is that A Shot in the Dark is quote unquote the best one, but it led to the breakup of the duo. Not to say that they didn't respect each other, because obviously they came back to work together again, because they made 5 films with original material That's what I'm going to say first and foremost. We'll get to that sixth outing in a second. But Peter Sellers is quoted saying, "We clicked on comedy, and we were lucky we found each other because we both had so much respect for it. We also had an ability to come up with funny things and great situations that had to be explored. But in that exploration, there would oftentimes be disagreement. But I couldn't resist those moments when we gelled. And if you ask me who contributed most to those things, it couldn't have happened unless both of us were involved, even though it wasn't always happy."
Yeah, no, their relationship is known for being contentious, and it's often looked at that they would only really kind of come back together when both of them needed it, you know, when they were like kind of on a low streak. After Shot in the Dark, they so don't want to work together anymore that the next movie in the series doesn't have either of them involved. But MGM, like, very, like, you know, eager to keep this franchise going, they make Inspector Clouseau starring Alan Arkin as Clouseau. The less said about that movie, just the better. You know, without Blake Edwards and without Peter Sellers, it really is. It's kind of atrocious.
It's crazy though. It's atrocious. But did you know that it cost $2.5 million to make, and it made $100 million?
Yeah.
And that was in 1975. That's astonishing. It's astonishing that they didn't bring Alan Arkin back, even though it made so much money. Is it that it's that bad? Hey,
it's pretty bad. Yeah.
Okay. There's gonna be a lot of me asking these questions because I'm genuinely curious of how these stack up, especially up against Son of the Pink Panther. So yeah, it's really that bad.
I mean, I will come in and say I think you might have misread something, Chris, because I'm seeing that it made 1.9 million. I think maybe you were looking at a misplaced decimal point there, because there's no way Inspector Clouseau was that big of a hit. Like, because it's even.
Oh, hold on. I'm looking at The Return of the Pink Panther.
Yes, that makes much more sense.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. I take it back. So it makes sense. When they come back together, it makes $100 million.
And actually, in between, like before they get to Return of Pink Panther, they kind of had reunited for The Party, which is a great comedy. A little bit problematic today, as Peter Sellers plays an Indian character. But a very, very funny film and a comedy classic for its time. And that brings them back together. But then it still takes a little bit more time before they're both ready to come back for 1975's Return of the Pink Panther. And yeah, that is the one. That one was huge because they hadn't done a Pink Panther film together since 1964. So this has been, over 10 years that people have been waiting to see Peter Sellers finally return to this character. And I'll just kind of start blowing through them here because we don't need to speak about all these.
Sure.
But that sets up what is, these later Pink Panther films, starting with Return, then going to 1976's The Pink Panther Strikes Again, and 1978's Revenge of the Pink Panther. For me, the thing that defines those three in particular, they really do feel like a separate series almost than the Pink Panther and Shot in the Dark. And obviously there is the thing of them being like 10 years removed. One is kind of, those first two are from the 60s and these are from the 70s. But they're also just so much more at this point, and I know you watched some clips and stuff, you might already have seen this. Those later ones really are more Naked Gun-ish kind of in their approach. They're just so broad, and Clouseau gets so dumb, and his accent becomes so exaggerated. And I don't mean this negatively at all, because they are just, at this point, they're just fully zoomed in on how silly can we make this. No considerations of continuity. Inspector Dreyfus, Clouseau's boss in one film, because it's kind of the defining character trait of him as he goes through many of the sequels, is he hates Clouseau and he's always trying to get Clouseau killed.
Right.
And in one of the films, he just goes full on nuts, becomes a supervillain, and tries to like blow up the entire world, and is evaporated at the very end. And then the next movie, he's just like back, and he's back as like the main inspector. And nobody says anything about it, so they didn't care about continuity. They just really cared about making people laugh. Mm-hmm. And those later ones are just completely silly. But the thing is, with those three, like, again, they were always doing very well. They're making a lot of money, but Peter Sellers and Blake Edwards were not always getting along. And there's definitely a lot of stories about those sets being very, very contentious and very stressful at times.
Yeah. And in doing the research, I found out that Sellers had a bunch of heart attacks. And in the later films, he's noticeably slower. The gags are noticeably not as big.
Slower, and there's a lot of physical comedy where you can tell it's his stunt double and not him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I bring that up because unfortunately he does pass away in 1980.
At a time where he was actually kind of trying to take the series. I don't want to say take the series away from Edwards because that sounds kind of maybe more shitty. I don't know. It's hard to say, but he had written his own Pink Panther film, Romance of the Pink Panther. And that was meant to be the next one. And he was going to move ahead without Blake Edwards and make it. And he had just like turned in the script. And 3 days later, he had his, unfortunately, final heart attack, the fatal one. And Blake Edwards, now this is where it gets tricky because I don't know how I feel about this decision.
Yes. I've been very curious to pick your brain of this because especially in the recent Disney Star Wars era, I wanted to pick your brain. So go ahead, explain.
So 1976 is The Pink Panther Strikes Again. The first cut of that film was like 3 hours long. They ended up with just so much material. And they edited it down to about an hour and a half. So there was a lot sitting on the cutting room floor. And so when Peter Sellers passed away, Blake Edwards, now depending on who you talk to, either saw an opportunity to pay tribute to his former friend or to kind of use his former friend's memory to make a quick buck.
Right.
And decided he saw an opportunity still to continue the series. And so in 1982, we get Trail of the Pink Panther, which is a posthumous sequel, obviously, for Sellers. It is a movie about Inspector Clouseau going missing and a reporter going around and interviewing different people about Clouseau. And they basically then flash back to a lot of sequences that are primarily built from the deleted sequences from The Pink Panther Strikes Again. And also a lot of like alternate takes and just kind of reused footage from the previous films. So you want to know how I feel about it? It's clearly not the best in the series. I am glad it exists because it does allow us to see all this extra Sellers footage.
Right.
Now, nowadays that stuff would probably just been put onto like a DVD. Like at some point they would have made like a bonus DVD called...
What's a DVD?
Well, a DVD or Blu-ray, you know what I mean? But like... This stuff would have been revealed at some point, but in the early 80s, we didn't know that was ever going to come. Like, home video is still, a novelty. Yeah. So, like, the idea of, like, using it to make a movie at least meant we got to see that footage. But at the same time, it does feel kind of crass. And it's, like, it is distracting how often, like, the early scenes before Clouseau disappears, whenever you just see him like walking on the street, it's like so clearly not Peter Sellers, and it reminds me of like Game of Death, the Bruce Lee movie that does the same thing, where they had some Bruce Lee footage and they built a movie around what they had, and that one's even more disgusting because they actually got Bruce Lee's family to agree to let them use footage of his actual funeral in the movie. It's gross.
Yeah. No.
But so I've always had like a love-hate relationship with Trail of the Pink Panther. It's not one I would ever like revisit. When I do like an entire series like watch, I usually will cap it with that one just because you do get to see the last bits. And Herbert Lom does get some great stuff in that movie as Dreyfus. Like that's the thing too. I should say Dreyfus is also a great character. Like Clouseau is the star. Everyone knows Peter Sellers. But a lot of credit for the comedy of the series has to go to Dreyfus and Herbert Lom's portrayal. And also Burt Kwok as Kato, Clouseau's like manservant sidekick who he's hired to always attack him at any moment.
That was hilarious, by the way.
Yes.
When I learned about this character that is just randomly in these movies and will jump out of pots and fridges and from behind closed doors just to attack and keep Clouseau on his toes.
Yeah,
that is a genius gag.
I hope you do go on to watch these because I can't remember if it's Return or Strikes Again, but one of them, the fight scene between him and Kato, is honestly like to me one of just the funniest sequences ever. Like I remember as a kid, it's just one of those like laughing so hard you can barely breathe watching it.
Awesome.
So that is a great concept, and like so they still get more to do. But yeah, Peter Sellers' widow is certainly not very happy. She sued Edwards and the studio about that film. That didn't stop them from trying to go on again though. And as I mentioned, then you have 1983's Curse of the Pink Panther, which doesn't have any more Peter Sellers footage to use, but does try to continue the continuity with again, they're trying to find the missing Clouseau, and Dreyfus purposely picks like the dumbest detective in the world, which is this American detective played by Ted Wass, a great comedic star. Ted Wass, we all remember him, right? He was on like Soap at the time. I think that's why Blake Edwards picked him. But obviously he's not remembered today for, you watch this movie and you'll see why. But I think this was Blake Edwards saying, well, maybe we can have the series take place in America now, and it'll be about this American detective. But this was meant to be the passing of the torch movie.
Yeah.
The only thing worth watching this movie, and it's not even worth watching because it's good, but it's just so bizarre, is that it is like the final appearance of Inspector Clouseau, and he's played by Roger Moore, who is at kind of the height of his like James Bond outing here. And the idea is that Clouseau has now become a master criminal. Actually, he's fallen in love with another criminal. He's gotten involved with her, and he's gotten plastic surgery not only to look like Roger Moore, but the joke in the movie is that he is Roger Moore. Like Roger Moore, the actor who plays James Bond, is actually Clouseau, and nobody realizes it. So it's Roger Moore doing like a really bad, but like so bad it's funny Peter Sellers as Clouseau impression.
Right.
Just go watch that part on YouTube. Don't bother with the rest of the movie.
Okay.
I'd say, yeah.
Well, that takes us to Son of the Pink Panther, where we mention Roberto Benigni takes over, but he wasn't even close to being the first choice.
No, he's pretty down the list.
Yeah, which I found that quite shocking. So Blake Edwards comes back to direct and write, as we said before, and his first choice is Kevin Kline.
Yeah.
From Wild Wild West fame. Go listen to that episode of Failure to Franchise.
I think he probably would have been thinking about Kevin Kline here, probably from A Fish Called Wanda. I think, like, time-wise, it's like, because that was 1988. Kevin Kline had won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for that. And it is a very, like, kind of broad, silly comedic performance. So I get that. I actually get the idea of Kevin Kline, and actually a lot of his names we're about to mention. I'll kind of weigh in on each one. I'd like to actually hear you do the same. What do you think about the idea of Kevin Kline taking over as like the son of Clouseau?
I like Kevin Kline. I like his voice. I mentioned this in Wild Wild West. I like when Kevin Kline is on screen. There's something about him that I like. He's got really good comedic timing, and he plays a really good. I wonder what he would be like in this film, because we'll get to how his son is portrayed. But Kevin Kline is very good at being very dry. So I wonder how it would have worked here. But I am a fan of that idea.
We have a little bit of an idea or a preview of what he might have been like in this, if only because he does go on to star in French Kiss in like the mid 90s or later 90s, which is a romantic comedy with him and Meg Ryan, and he plays like a French character in that, even with like the mustache and everything. And that's actually a romantic comedy that I actually quite like. That's not one of my favorite genres, but that's what I enjoy, and it's primarily because I do think Kevin Kline is very funny in it. So. That's from 1995, yeah. So I look at that movie and I go, oh, this is like at least this character's more confident and capable than the character here. But the French accent and everything, you go like, oh yeah, okay, he probably would have been able to pull this off. But
he funnily enough, he goes on to play Dreyfus in the Pink Panther reboot in 2006.
Yes, only once though, not in the sequel. So, but yeah, no, that is interesting that he was almost Clouseau's son, and then he just goes on to do the remake. But yeah, he was attached for a while. He was a fan of the series. He wanted to really work with Blake Edwards. Well, I mean, we've mentioned Blake Edwards. If people don't know, some of our listeners might be younger. Blake Edwards would also be quite a draw for people because he is like one of the most successful, well-regarded comedy directors of all time, too, we should mention. You know, like Blake Edwards, also known for Breakfast at Tiffany's, I mentioned The Party, The Great Race, 10, Victor Victoria, you know, just so like a classic director. I can see why all these actors wanted to work with him, but it doesn't work out with Kline. So who do we move on to next, Chris?
We move on to Mr. Bean himself, Rowan Atkinson.
Yes.
I love this idea.
Yes.
Big fan of Rowan Atkinson, huge fan of Mr. Bean. That is a staple of Chris's childhood. And I would have loved to see him in this role. Unfortunately, as much as Atkinson loves Blake Edwards and likes the idea, he realizes there's no fucking way that I can step into Peter Sellers' shoes.
Yeah, this kind of kept getting them, actually. I think a lot of actors were afraid. Like, even when Peter Sellers first passed away, they had talked to Dudley Moore about taking over as Clouseau, and he was the same thing, where he's just like, I can't do that, you know? I think a lot of people get, like, stage fright. So you have to find, like, the right actor and an actor who kind of has, like, a little bit of balls of steel to, like, even attempt that. And both Kline and Atkinson were interested, but not willing to take that leap. Then we get one, and I just to say really quickly, I'm with you. I think that would have been amazing if Rowan Atkinson.
You maybe get a glimpse of this character in a little movie that I love called Rat Race. I think Rowan Atkinson is fucking awesome in that movie, and that is another one, especially for me and my brother. We go back to Rat Race many times. I think that is a kind of a forgotten great comedy of the.
It's funny because like that is a movie I enjoy as well, and I remember just to annoy my friends, and I maybe you did the same thing for like the first couple of years after the movie came out, just very often just to annoy people, just walking around going, "It's a race, like just
always,
doing that a lot.
always.
It's a race, I'm winning.
Then we get to meet like the one that came the closest, I suppose, but the strangest one.
Yes.
And that is who I believe he actually is signed, right, for a bit.
Correct.
And that is Gerard De Pardue.
Yeah. Yes, the airline pisser himself, Gerard De Pardue. Yeah, maybe they dodged a bullet here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they
dodged a stream.
They definitely dodged that stream. Not when you like. I know he's been in some comedies. Obviously, Green Card. One of his more well-known American films or roles. My Father the Hero is one I kind of remember. But I don't think Gerard Depardieu pops into mind when you think like great comedic talents necessarily.
No.
I think you just think of like grumpy asshole guys is what Gerard Depardieu pops into mind for. But no, he comes really close. But a lot of things kind of derail it. The movie takes a while to get going because of some behind the scenes shenanigans, which maybe you can talk about a little. But by the time they kind of get to where they want to start filming, he's now involved with playing Columbus in Ridley Scott's 1492. So he's no longer available. And at the same time, because he's such an amazing human being, he had also made some not great remarks about rape in an interview he'd done with an American journalist. So MGM was suddenly like, I don't know if maybe this is the right guy to be the face of the Pink Panther series. so he is no longer available as well. Before we get into like the next couple names here, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes crap that I was just alluding to?
Yeah, it's that age old tale and failure to franchise the podcast. Producerial changes.
Yeah.
The main producer, Giancarlo Peretti, he took control of MGM and then withdrew financing for the project entirely. So much so that Blake Edwards actually sued the studio in LA Superior Court. Then a different producer comes on board, Alan Ladd Jr. MGM settles with Blake Edwards out of court, and then Ladd re-greenlights the film, and like Trev said, Depardieu is unavailable. So, yeah, it's just a lot of kind of courtroom gobbledygook in this one.
And if the name Alan Ladd Jr. sounds familiar to many people, that's because obviously he's very famous for, while he worked as president of 20th Century Fox, he approved production of Star Wars. So I think kind of his two most notable, I believe, kind of historical markers are he approved Star Wars and he also got Son of the Pink Panther going again. I think that's, of course, the two things he's remembered for.
Yeah, are those are on his headstone? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, after
his headstone just has like his headstone's like a bust of C-3PO and Roberto Benigni.
Oh my god. Well, speaking of that, we finally get to him, Roberto Benini. We finally get to them.
With an asterisk.
Yes, because another actor is actually waiting in the wings just in case Benini does not sign on, and that is Tim Curry. That is also an actor that I would have really liked to see.
Yeah,
I genuinely love Tim Curry.
I have to say, out of all these names, that's maybe the one I wish had happened, I think.
Interesting,
like,
okay.
Because that seems like just very, very exciting to me. Like, and then it's interesting too because I read that he was like, apparently Tim Curry was very excited and really wanted it. Like, of anybody I read about, it sounded like he was the one who was like kind of gung ho about it, to the point where I'm kind of surprised he didn't end up with that for that reason. And interestingly enough, because he was like waiting in the wings, because it seemed very possible he might get it. Apparently, you can find online. I haven't looked too deep into this, but they did make some Son of the Pink Panther promo posters with Tim Curry's like likeness on them. And eventually those were changed to Roberto Benini, but they did they were hedging their bets on this one, and Tim Curry was really into it. And I just think because I mentioned before, I believe you are aware that one of my all-time favorite comedies is Clue.
Yes,
and I think of the kind of manic comedic performance Tim Curry is giving in that film, and I just place a French accent on that, and like an over-the-top kind of French accent, which I know Tim Curry could do. And I think he would have been very, very funny in this.
Sorry, didn't mean to frighten anyone.
You're a bit late for that!
Then there were 3 more murders.
So who did it?
Let's consider each murder one by one. Professor Plum, you knew that Mr. Body was still alive. Even psychiatrists can tell the difference between patients who are alive or dead. You fired the gun at him in the dark and missed. So you pretended he was dead. That's how you were able to kill him later, unobserved.
Well, it sounds like Tim Curry didn't get the job because Roberto Benigni actually found the film much needed money. So because they hired this up-and-coming Italian comic actor, I guess, Aurelio De Laurentiis, Dino De Laurentiis' nephew, starts to get interested and actually, I think offers up half the budget at this point. So it was in much needed third-party funding. You sign an Italian actor, up and coming. All of a sudden, the Italians, my brethren, are obviously now involved. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Benini on the other side when we talk more about the film. But like, we should say, like, with Tim Curry, like Tim Curry was a known, established actor at this point too.
Yeah.
But it's not like Roberto Benigni was an entirely unknown. Like you said, up and coming, and that's really true. Like in Italy, he was already getting some heat.
Yes.
You know, he had like made a movie called Johnny Stecchino, which is like a comedy about him, I believe, getting mistaken for like a gangster. That was really, really popular. And even over in America, he'd already appeared in a couple Jim Jarmusch films, most notably Down by Law. Which, you know, so he had like a lot of like kind of cred in the indie artsy fartsy scene as well, and that is a really good movie. If anyone like me likes you know, kind of the indie films of the 80s and 90s, Down by Law is this kind of cool black and white, you know, like a little comedy about these three men who are in prison. It's Tom Waits, John Lurie, and Roberto Benigni. So he was kind of known here, but it was definitely like this was supposed to be the thing, right? This was going to be moving him into the next level. I just also want to quickly say, Chris, before, I know I just heard you take your breath to say something, but to throw one more name in there, another actor also wanted the role, who I think also I can see, and that's Bronson Pinchot. He apparently wanted the role, but MGM apparently passed on him because he had recently done Blame It on the Bellboy, which is like his tribute to like Jerry Lewis kind of film. So, you know, that he probably felt like maybe that was his audition for this. But that movie had bombed, and so MGM didn't want anything to do with him. But he's another kind of performer that I could see fitting into this, you know.
Well, I know you mentioned the artsy-fartsy nature of everything, and seeing that we're two in the pink at this point, do you want to find out if this movie stinks?
Let's do it.
Middle Eastern royalty is kidnapped. War could be declared. Only one agent is available.
That would be Gambretti.
Hello?
Tough luck, Middle East. You get Roberto Benini.
That felt good!
In Blake Edwards' Son of the Pink Panther.
He's just like his father.
He's got the same legendary courage. The same powers of deduction.
You've been hunting?
The same taste for adventure. The French have a word for a man like this. Blake Edwards, Son of the Pink Panther.
Fun is important.
Exactly.
When Princess Yasmin of the Kingdom of Lugash is kidnapped by Han Zarba, Police Commissioner Charles Dreyfus travels to southern France to supervise the rescue effort. Clumsy policeman Jacques Gambrelli is assigned to assist him in the search. But Dreyfus is appalled to learn Jacques is not just his newfound partner, but actually the illegitimate son of his old nemesis, the late Inspector Clouseau.
Yep, Son of the Pink Panther. Chris, as someone who came to this, like, you know, with, you know, pretty new to this series, I would like to hear what you think about this this attempt to restart it, because you had very fresh eyes going in.
It's so fresh that, like, I went into this film totally free of expectations,
right?
Totally free of preconceived notions. The only even knowledge I have of Roberto Benigni is in Life is Beautiful, the 1997 film. As I think every Italian ever in 1997, you had to be sat in a chair and, you know, Clockwork Orange style, and you had to watch that film because it had to win. Because it ended up winning Best Foreign Language Film, and he won Best Actor. And, you know, everybody remembers him jumping around on stage and flailing about. And was he playing this character at the Oscars? Who knows? But that leads into what I think about this film. If this was my one and only watch of a Pink Panther film, I would burn it all to the ground. I think this movie is so unfunny. Not to say that there's no highlight. I'll say we'll talk about Charles Dreyfus, in a bit. But I say that this movie is bad because of Roberto Benigni. And the reason I say that is because I wrote a few things here. So let me see if I can jumble it up nicely for you. He lacks the charming buffoonery of Peter Sellers. Once again, I don't really know this franchise, but I know Peter Sellers from pop culture. I know Inspector Clouseau due to the world. I do not like Jacques Gambrelli. I find him irritating. I find him so fucking dumb that he almost seems a little slow. And he's kind of, what he reminds me of? He reminds me of the class clown that just won't shut the fuck up. Okay? Remember those guys in school where they were just always trying desperately to get laughs and acceptance from the audience, from their people, from classmates, but they just won't shut up. They just shut up. Just a little bit. Just stop moving for a second. And I think that's the problem, is that he's so incompetent and he's so dumb that it's not funny. It almost comes off just sad and exhausting. So the little visual gags of him fumbling about just do nothing for you. You're just like, okay, let's get this show on the road. Like let's get to something. And I found this movie just totally dies with him as the lead. So I will say that for now, and we will get into your view.
Ha! That felt good.
All right, well, so you just don't get comedy. No, I'm basically right there with you, but maybe for slightly different reasons. So here's what I have to say about Roberto Benigni, because obviously a discussion about this film is ultimately kind of a referendum on Roberto Benigni. There's just no way around it. You have to talk about him more than you kind of talk about Pink Panther when you're looking at this movie, because it's obviously made to be this star vehicle for him and make him, if not the new Peter Sellers, then at least the new face of comedy and this particular franchise moving forward. And Roberto Benigni in general, I think today is a really weird figure, because the backlash against him was so immediate after the Oscars that year.
Yeah.
With the Life is Beautiful thing. And the thing is, Life is Beautiful is a pretty great movie, I think.
I think it's fantastic. Let me just say that. I never actually said my thoughts on that film. Yeah. I think that film is phenomenal, and I've seen it many, many times.
And he's great in it, right? But his real life persona, like you said, the jumping on stage, the running over the seats, it really peppered the way people look at him, I think. And it is one of those things where you do kind of wonder. Sometimes, I think of the way the French look at Jerry Lewis versus the way Americans look at Jerry Lewis.
Sure.
And so, because I know Roberto Benigni has continued to be very popular and well regarded in Italy, as far as I can see. But then I think of how the way he kind of just became a joke to American audiences after the Oscars. People would make fun of him as a person more than they would be willing to look at him as a performer. Yeah. And I remember when he made his Pinocchio film in the early 2000s, the vitriol against that movie and against him. And I don't really have strong feelings about him one way or the other, because really for me, like I said, I really like Down by Law. I really like Life is Beautiful. I really do not like this movie we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think he could have been good in this. So that's where I don't disagree with you, but I think he's a victim to this movie more than he's at fault. So that's probably the only difference between us here. In that I think what the movie is asking him to do doesn't play to his strengths. And actually, even though Blake Edwards wrote and directed this, I think it misinterprets what people want from a Pink Panther movie and what Inspector Clouseau's son should be. Because you said the word exhausting, and that's a great word to sum up Roberto Benigni in general, but particularly in this film. But I think the problem here is that what he's really missing is, you said charm, but actually what makes Clouseau very funny is he has this misplaced confidence. He's an idiot, but he's not aware he's an idiot. He's this like super destructive force who's always doing things the wrong way and stumbles into accidentally solving the case. But Roberto Benigni, this is actually interesting because Blake Edwards made the same mistake with the Ted Wass character in Curse of the Pink Panther. With those two characters, with that detective and then with Clouseau's son, he thinks it's just about pratfalls.
Yeah.
It's just, he's very, very clumsy and that's funny, right? And so you do have in this way too many just extended sequences of like, aha, now he's falling again. Now he's getting up and he's falling again. And yes, there was that in the Clouseau, in the Peter Sellers movies, but it wasn't only that. And Peter Sellers did just pull that stuff off better. So I have other specific things about this movie that we'll talk about as we go further. But yeah, that's, I think Benini could have played that confidence, could have played like, you know, the more cocky but not realizing how dumb he is, but he plays this like so innocent. He's like innocent and like he's meant to be like kind of charmingly dumb, but that's not as funny as a detective who is so sure of himself but doesn't realize how everyone hates him.
He is Doofy from Scary Movie.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that in a, I'm trying not to sound problematic or mean about it, but there is a sense of like, this guy maybe is a little slow. He lives with his parent or his mom, sorry. You start to wonder, how does this guy even go about his day? How does he even get dressed in the morning? Like how is this guy, how did he get this job as being a cop?
My sister is unconscious.
She is?
She should be taken to a hospital.
Where is she?
In the van.
Excuse me. Your sister is in his van?
Look, I'm Commissioner Dreyfus. If you will allow me...
Excuse me, just a moment. Just a moment. When I asked you if anyone was hurt, you replied, yes, in my van.
No, I said yes in the van, not in my van.
No, you did not say yes in the van, not yes in the van. You said yes. You did not say yes my van, not yes the van.
It just doesn't do him any favors, and I'm glad you brought up Blake Edwards because his directing in this one is so flat.
Yeah.
It's missing a freneticism. I don't know how to say it. There's so many shots that the camera seems to be on a tripod, and it's like, okay, Rob, now just keep fucking bumbling. Keep going. And you're like, where's the cuts? Where's the angles? Where's the... Maybe that would have helped. Because you know what? Roberto Benini is not Jim Carrey. Okay? And it's not working. And it's... And something that could help him is some creative camera movements, some creative angles, some dare I say it, mise en scene, which I hate that term, and it's super, super pretentious. But you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's just so flat.
Oh,
so
I mentioned
boring.
earlier that this is Blake Edwards' final film. He officially retired from directing. Like, he announced it like 2 years after this, and this is the last one he ever made. And I think it's tempting for people to look at this, and I've seen it done, where people say, like, oh, this movie is so bad it made him retire. But I think you watch this movie and you go, he was ready to retire.
Yeah, he's bored.
Like, he's bored. Yeah, he's not... I think he got a little, like... itch to say, like, maybe I could get that series going again, but I think it was almost like a personal challenge for himself, maybe. But I really think he kind of, you can see, there's no gas in the tank. He is not, he doesn't have the comedic energy anymore. And maybe that does come from, like, once he got on set, maybe it was just like, you know what, I don't have, as much as Peter and I did not always get along, I don't have my partner with me, and I have this young kid, I don't know how to use this kid, and it's just not, it's not working. Yeah, and beyond that, I'll say this too. Here's the other thing that's not serving Roberto Benigni well, or this character with the Jacques Umbrelli character. And this goes back to our discussion about Mordecai, which is when I believe we first talked about this series, because obviously Mordecai and what Johnny Depp was doing was so clearly influenced by Peter Sellers and Clouseau. So I'm going to actually throw the same complaint at this movie that we said with Mordecai, in that this movie is trying to go back to like the Pink Panther shot in the dark vibe of saying, let's have Gumbrelli, or Clouseau Jr. as he becomes halfway through, be the only like silly thing about the movie, and the rest of the movie is played very, very straight to actually a distracting degree to me, and I'll talk about what I mean in a moment. But I think Gambrelli and what Benini's doing would have worked better if this movie was trying to be more like Return of the Pink Panther or Pink Panther Strikes Again, and going for that just all out Zucker Brothers-esque nonsense. But because and that's why the characters work, because you said, because it's actually acting like Umbrella can exist in the real world, you're like, well, no, he can't. Like, why aren't people more befuddled by this. He doesn't fit into this world. And so the thing I was just alluding to is what I don't know if this probably didn't bother you as much as it did me because you haven't seen the other ones. But in the first, before we get to Gumbrelli, in like the first 5 minutes, there's this like sequence with the kidnapping of the princess, and the bad guys are like flat out machine gunning people to death.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this doing in this movie? Like, the other movies would have deaths, of course, but they were always, like a knife is thrown at someone and they fall down. Like, this movie was like trying to do like a James Bond kind of thing, and it doesn't work for Pink Panther. I don't want to see, it's not even that it's that violent. It's just, I'm supposed to be like laughing hysterically in a couple minutes, and you're showing like a crew get like murdered by kidnappers. It was...
Well, not even James Bond. Like, what I was thinking this whole time, because Robert Davi shows up, right? He's the main villain, right? And Robert Davi...
And actually, he had just been the villain in a Bond film as well, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's like Mr. Villain guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching this opening, and you know what I thought to myself? I wrote it down. I go... So, first of all, backstory. Me and Trev really like the Red Letter Media guys. I think those guys are amazing. They're just absolutely hilarious. And we love their show, Best of the Worst. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't checked that out, please do, because it's fantastic. But that's when they sit around and watch bad movies and then say and vote on which one is the best bad movie. And I was watching the beginning of this movie, and I was like, man, this feels like a Best of the Worst film. As like, there's all this gun violence. There's no squibs. there's no blood. It's totally outrageous. There's a little bit of karate going on for no reason, and then I had to like kind of check my notes again. I'm like, am I watching a Pink Panther film? Mm-hmm. Or am I watching some hokey junk action movie from the 1980s? Listeners, this movie came out the same year as Jurassic Park. And I know Jurassic Park is like, a masterpiece, one of the greatest blockbusters of all time. But seriously, go look at a trailer for this film. And this came out in August of 1993. This movie feels like an 80s film, a bad 80s film.
You don't even have to go as highfalutin as Jurassic Park, Chris, because I was thinking about this today. So I was thinking about the fact we had to record this episode today, and I was just thinking to myself, oh, it's kind of exciting that we're finally getting back to like the 90s, because we've been doing pretty much only 2000s movies lately. Yeah. And I was like, well, what's the last 90s movie we did? And I was scrolling through episodes, and the last 90s film we did was 1995's Tank Girl. And I was just thinking, wow, Tank Girl's 1995, that's just a couple years after this, and look at the difference in those two movies, like visually, Like how flat, how boring. This has that like late 80s like aesthetic to it more than 90s. Oh, yeah. And I think Blake Edwards is trying to like class it up a little bit here and make it feel like a Bond film in some parts, but that's a bad move. It's a miscalculation, and especially for this character, because the character doesn't work in that world.
You also hit on a perfect thing about I love you saying about how this one should have been just balls to the walls gags and crazy goofy people. I totally agree, because well, mind you, I had about 20 questions during watching this film, but I have 4 main ones, and they're like tad spoilery, but honestly I don't give a shit. I don't know if you care, but so I'm gonna list 4 of them off. And
you're going to rescues the princess, folks. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. But getting there, why does Jacques pretend to be a doctor? Why does he make that decision? Number one. No
You're
answer.
asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, I believe he overhears that like the bad guy needs a doctor.
Okay. So
I
why?
will say, I'll throw myself under the bus here. And I will say I got a slight giggle out of when he wants them to believe he's a doctor, because he that's the idea, right? He wants them to take him as the bad guy. And I did get a slight giggle out of him putting on the coat and like walking by them and kind of singing like very loudly, "If you're looking for a doctor, I'm a very good doctor." Like that made me laugh. I'm not gonna lie.
And that's fine. And I smirked for sure.
Yeah.
But how do the bad guys not recognize Jacques? Because they met him earlier.
Yeah, that one I have no answer for. Okay. That's distractingly bad. Okay.
Why do the bad guys even entertain this obvious idiot? Why? So they bring Jacques in to do surgery or to stitch up the main bad guy played by Robert Davi. And why do they give him the time of day? Why is it? Why do they even allow him to get a syringe near the head bad guy? Why? Anyway, that's that. And then fourth, but not least, but I will end it here, is why does the princess fuck him.
You're telling me you don't look at Roberto Benigni and go like, "Oh man, I get it." Like,
I'll ask you again. Like, dude,
now, Chris, to be fair, go look up Roberto Benigni's real life wife, and you'll see there's something about this guy.
I know. I again. Okay, star power notwithstanding. In the context of the film, this guy is a dumb doofus.
Yeah,
and
she is. You know what? There's actually a problematic answer to that, because I believe every time she encounters him, she's like under the effects of drugged. Yeah, she's drugged. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's. I just was like, when they start to hook up, it's out of absolutely nowhere, and then they have like pillow talk after, and I was just truly baffled by it, and I have many other questions.
Well, the pillow talk after is where it really bothered me. Like, I mean, obviously, I should be bothered by the fact that the drugged woman sleeps with the but also like that's where you start. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of your questions here, and starting with this like pillow talk thing, because this is where I want to come back to Blake Edwards kind of missing the point of his own series, and not remembering what people enjoyed about the Sellers entries. And one is that in the pillow talk sequence, why is he not played as a buffoon there? You know? Like that, like is played actually like he's supposed to. Wait, I think he's meant to be like kind of sweet and romantic, and it's like no, he should be like being annoying here too. Like he should be like such a idiot that we're just like, I can't believe this guy scored this girl. But I think they want us to be like, oh, good for Jacques, you know? Yeah. And I think that's a miscalculation. But to go back to your previous question, this actually brings me to where I think this movie misses the boat the most. Because you just mentioned why, when he goes as the doctor, do they not recognize him? Well, Chris, I think maybe you're aware of this from some of your research, but one of the most, like, one of the funniest things about the original series, and one of the most recurring bits, is the idea of Clouseau being this, like, master of disguise.
Yeah.
Like, wearing different disguises when he goes undercover, and that's always played for laughs, and it's always very funny. The disguises are ridiculous. You know, they get torn off, and all these like various things happen. There are some very funny moments in the original series where they play it like he's in a disguise, and he thinks like people can't tell it's him, but some people can. But other times they just play it like the disguise actually works. But the strange thing is, this movie keeps alluding to like things from the original Pink Panther series and not delivering on them. So he does go to Dr. Ball's Disguise Emporium, which is a recurring character and bit from the Peter Sellers films, right? So you get your little legacy sequel nostalgia thing here. He goes to visit Dr. Ball's. But that sequence is like, it's just almost immediately over. It doesn't stay at the shop. Like what would always happen in the Peter Sellers films is you'd watch him put on some costumes there, and they'd always be like gags and jokes, like look how ridiculous these costumes are, and something crazy would always happen with them. Like, you know, there's one where he gets like a hunchback suit and he inflates it too much and he starts floating away because it's like a balloon. And this doesn't do that. Like the joke is revealed later that Dr. Balls has given him and Kato like bad costumes when they go to like an Arabic country. Like Kato's dressed as a Hasidic Jew. Like that's the only joke that comes out of it, and that's the only costume either of them wear, and it's not that funny. And it's so that doctor sequence, I'm just like, well, why did this not come later? Why didn't they have him go in costume? Because that's something we all like from the previous movies. And then I mentioned Kato. Well, that takes it even further because he does meet up with Kato in this. Kato kind of cons him into taking him on as his sidekick because he worked for his dad before. But the movie never does a Kato-Jacques fight.
No.
And I was like, what? How are you missing that? That's what we love about Kato. The Kato-Clouseau fight sequences were always something everyone looked forward to. They were like the comedic highlight of many of those entries. And here you have, like, when he first meets him, he jumps out at him, and then for the rest of the movie, he's just kind of like a sidekick that follows him around and doesn't do much.
No, so he jumps out of a fridge one time and then just gets kind of pushed over to go back into the fridge.
Yeah. So it's strange because it's like they want to remind you that this is a Pink Panther movie, but they don't want to fully commit to it. It's almost like, that's the thing, I think this is the strangest thing to say because this shouldn't be a complaint, but this movie is trying too hard to have its own identity. Like this movie should be leaning more into the nostalgia of the original series. It should be trying to be as silly as the other entries. It should be giving us all the ridiculous disguises. It should be giving us Kato versus Gombrelli. And by trying to avoid being like a Peter Sellers imitation, it's unfortunately not finding its own thing, and that's why it just kind of lays there flat the entire time.
Well, I also found it very strange how they deal with the legacy of Clouseau. And this is where I got to pick your brain a little bit more. But, like, in this universe, in this world, Inspector Clouseau is so famous and so recognizable that he has a statue built of him.
Yeah.
It makes national news when it's discovered that Jacques is a Clouseau. They go to the Middle East, and some random belly dancer recognizes Jacques from the news now and wants his autograph. So I have to ask you, like, and obviously, from my research, the franchise takes some cheats, when it comes to continuity. But I never really got the idea that Clouseau was like this like god figure in France.
That's actually no. I actually will defend that one a little bit.
Okay.
Because especially by like the later films, it is kind of shown that Clouseau is pretty famous. Like he really is. He's meant to be kind of like, and it's the whole joke is that he doesn't deserve it, right? And that's like what drives Dreyfus insane is that people love him, and he's become this like public noted figure. And like one of the most beloved law enforcement officers in the world, but he's an idiot. He's a buffoon.
Right.
That's what Dreyfus hates. Okay. And by the time you get to like like Trail and Curse, like it is very much played like his disappearance is like a global news story. So I'll slightly defend that.
Okay.
I'm not saying it makes the movie any better, but it's not. Your other complaints are more in line with the series. I'll say like that's one where they're almost getting it right. That the story of like Clouseau having a son might be something that people would pay attention to. Okay. Speaking of him being the son, though, I just want to. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention, and because you also just mentioned, this actually was a great segue, because you mentioned this series' bizarre association with continuity. Just to like further confuse people, so his mom in this is actually a character from A Shot in the Dark, Maria Gambrelli, who was Clouseau's love interest in that film. Now, in that film, Maria Gambrelli was played by Elke Summer. Elke Summer played her in A Shot in the Dark. In this movie, she's played by Claudia Cardinelli. Now, if that does sound familiar to Pink Panther fans, that's because Claudia Cardinelli was in The Pink Panther playing a completely different character, the princess. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's even, like, at certain points you kind of feel like, is Blake Edwards just taking a piss? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Is he just messing with people? Because, like, he got like the wrong actress to play like the wrong part here. Is that supposed to be a joke? I don't know. But okay, also just really, so now to go back to where one last thing I want to say about it not feeling like enough like a previous Pink Panther movie. And again, this could be chalked up to this continuity thing, but I think it is doing the movie a disservice. I do think it's great to once again see Herbert Lom as Dreyfus. I do like him in this.
I was about to say, I want to jump in here and say that you had mentioned Dreyfus and his, his annoyance at Clouseau making the big times when he's just a dum-dum, right? And he falls into success. Now, Herbert Lom to me is the highlight of the movie for me. Like I think this movie is bad, like very, very bad. But I think Herbert Lom is trying so hard to elevate this film that he seriously looks like he's an old man. I don't want to say an old man, but he's an older guy at this point in 1993. And he's throwing himself into it, even on like a physical, just stunt way. And it's commendable, and he's very funny, and I like his little eye twitch thing. I like that little character trait. I assume that's what he's doing throughout the entire series.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought he was the big highlight of it. I wish there was more of him. It sucks that they make him bedridden the whole fucking movie, but yeah, he'd be great alongside. If he was going alongside of Jacques Gambrelli for the whole mission, I think this would have been a lot better. More of a two-hander, right?
Well, if he was doing that, or what I was about to allude to, and you're not wrong, like he is definitely the highlight of this film still, and it's exciting to see him back, and I think the movie would just be entirely useless if he wasn't there.
Yeah.
As opposed to just mostly useless. But I do think it's strange in this, and I don't know if it's meant to be that they wanted to try something different with this character, or that maybe there was a part of Blake Edwards that actually felt like this maybe wasn't going to get sequels, and so he wanted to like kind of wrap things up on like a better note. But as I just alluded to, the series always escalated the relationship between Dreyfus and Clouseau, right? Like Dreyfus never came around on Clouseau in the original series. Like he always hated him to the point where there's actually a great, like one of the great bits in Trail of the Pink Panther, the movie I said I have like, love-hate relationship with, is when Clouseau is believed to have been killed, right? So the world thinks he's dead. They ask Dreyfus to like speak at his funeral. and Dreyfus starts like laughing while he's giving the eulogy because he's so happy Clouseau's dead, and everyone mistakes it for him crying, and they're like, oh my god, he's so touched by losing his good friend. So like that bit is like very, very funny.
Yeah.
And then like I said, he like purposely tries to screw up the investigation to find Clouseau. Like he doesn't want him found. But the weird thing in this movie is that when he finds out Gombrelli is Clouseau's son, he is kind of like bothered by it, and it's like, you know, he gets the eye twitch back, he's like frustrated, but he almost immediately takes Gombrelli under his wing.
Yeah.
And like, it's strange because the movie really plays it like he's finally kind of accepted that Clouseau was maybe like good at what he did or something, and like he really becomes this like mentor figure for Gombrelli. And at the end, even when he spoiler alert, he ends up marrying Gombrelli's mom. They become a couple, and so the idea is like he you know becomes his stepdad at the end and finds out he has a twin sister. He's like, they play it like he's like, he finds like Gombrelli's antics annoying, but he kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Endearing. He's kind of endeared by it.
He's kind of endeared by it. He's kind of charmed by it. And
yeah.
I guess that's like a nice note to leave Dreyfus on, but the part of me that loves when Dreyfus is just like driven to insanity by Clouseau wishes they had pushed that again. I wish she was like more like, oh my god, this guy's a son. I can't believe this sucks. I wish she like went full on Dreyfus here. But it's like tough because like you said, even though I think that he still is probably giving the movie's best performance.
And I think that just comes down to both of our sensibilities towards comedy. You know, like we don't like necessarily mean humor in the vein of like, you know, Hangover 2. But I think we do like a little bit of edge and pessimism in our comedy. So yeah, and also a joke that never stops, right? Mm-hmm. So like it kind of sucks that joke stops.
Yeah.
You know, like again, I get that they're trying to leave off on a good note or maybe a little bit more of a whimsical note, but there were more sequels they wanted to make. So, I mean, if they were going to incorporate Herbert Lom in some capacity, I don't know if I would have wanted to see him truly now a father figure. You're right. It's so much more funny if he's just like, oh my God, why did I just marry this woman? Now there's two of them, you know? So, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, and I was actually kind of surprised when they had sequels in mind that the sister wasn't like maybe a more of a known actress or something.
Oh, they'd recast her.
They would have recast it, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, no. It's not like nowadays where they're just like, oh, Charlize Theron's at the end.
By the way, I mentioned this earlier, or I mentioned this person earlier, but do you know who that was playing his sister?
No.
That was Roberto Benigni's real life wife.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's less nepotism, more fun actually.
Yeah.
Also, especially because they're twins, and that's weird.
That is, I mean, it is weird. Maybe that was like meant to be like a joke for the Italian audience, you know?
Yeah.
That's maybe like, and it's one of those jokes that like flies over our head a little bit, but
totally.
This movie's too smart for us, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of what they might have done with sequels, Chris, now if they had done more of these, if they had gone on with more Gombrelli movies, would you also hope that we would get more versions of the Pink Panther theme done by Bobby McFerrin?
I really liked that opening, by the way.
Really?
Well, I mean, I thought it was like, I don't know if I really liked it. I was just like, I don't have any preconceived anything to the other openings, right? Mm-hmm. So this one was like this fun jazzy acapella. It sounds like that opening cost $1 million, by the way.
It did cost $1 million just for McFerrin's involvement. Yeah, it's not even this. It's not. I guess it's not that it's bad. Like there's like something kind of like he's just doing. It's a fun to have guest have like a little bit of a jazzy version of the theme.
Yeah,
I think it's more just for me like. It's funny because like nothing dates an early 90s movie more than like it's starting with Bobby McFerrin doing the theme. You know, like that's like I guarantee you 70% of the people listening to us right now are just like, who's Bobby McFerrin? What are they talking about? If you don't know, I implore you all to go listen to Don't Worry, Be Happy right now. And then I apologize because you will be angry at me. Because that will get stuck in your head and not for the right reason.
Like the moving fish?
Oh,
what was
is
that
what that
called?
sang?
Yeah, that's the fish. Don't worry, be happy now. It was. I think it was the
Big Mouth Billy Bass or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah, sorry, but that's what happens when you talk about this movie. I don't know.
Honestly, there's not much more to talk about. I was gonna kind of just jump into what happened as a result of this failure. obviously we said they were going to make more movies. This bombed horribly, critically and financially. So they shelved it for a couple years until in 1996 MGM was like, you know what, let's try to test the waters out, and they reached out to Robin Williams and Jim Carrey about maybe coming into the franchise, both of which obviously did not do it. But then what did they do? They put it on hold until the reboot, right?
Yeah, and even with the reboot, like it was there was talk about it being Mike Myers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
At one point, yeah, like Mike Myers, I think it circled it, and like obviously that makes a lot of sense because Mike Myers has always been very, 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 very vocal about Peter Sellers being his inspiration, his largest inspiration, I believe. And obviously, you look at something like Austin Powers, and you can feel like his attempts to be doing like Peter Sellers kind of thing, but it ends up going on to Steve Martin. Yeah. Now, this is interesting because. So I've never watched either Steve Martin movie like all the way through. I've seen sequences, and I've heard mostly bad stuff about them. If anything, I've heard the first one has its slight charms, but I love Steve Martin. I think Steve Martin is like look, his stand up is great. I love a lot of his movies. Like he's really is one of the most brilliant like comedic minds of his era. There's like nothing about him that feels like he should be the guy playing Clouseau. Honestly, I kind of don't really want to see anybody but Sellers play Clouseau, but there are certain performances, like when you mention like Robin Williams, or when you mention Mike Myers, like I can see them doing Clouseau in a way it's like, well, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Steve
Martin is just like, that was always so weird to me, and even like when I see him, it's like he's got that white Steve Martin hair, but then like the dark like black mustache. It's just like I could never. I don't think I can accept him as Clouseau. I think that's my problem with those movies and why I keep him at like a distance, and I'm like afraid to watch them. I just think there's something about I just see Steve Martin. I don't see that character. Does that make sense?
I can see it. I think it's just because Sellers. I mean, it goes back to a conversation me and you have personally and publicly about recasting of certain characters. Right? It's sometimes you reach such iconography that it is difficult for your brain to even process the character. Right? And I think that's the reason why so many of these actors said no. Along the way, or over 30 years, they tried to get new people, and everybody kept passing. So it's a tough one. I also think Steve Martin he's not the impression guy, and I think
that's kind of maybe that's what I mean. Yeah,
like Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, Mike Myers, those are the impression guys. That's where I would agree with you. Steve Martin seems like an odd fit if you're going for SNL cast members,
I was just thinking by that point in his career, by that point, like where he was like age-wise and everything, I don't necessarily think of him as still, I know he was at one time like a very physical comedian, but not anymore, right? And I think to be Clouseau, it's not, I think a lot of people, and this is what I get, this is the vibe I got from the trailers, and that's why I was like, whatever, is I think a lot of people look at Peter Sellers as Clouseau and go, oh, he's just doing a funny French voice.
Totally.
And like that's what I have to do if I'm going to play that part. Is I'm just going to put on the exaggerated French voice. And I remember, the trailer for the first one really being built around that how he says like hamburger, and stuff like that. And it's like, all right, like that's yes, I get it. That is a part of Clouseau, but let's not forget that Clouseau was funny back in Pink Panther and Shot in the Dark before he even really started to exaggerate that voice. So it's not just that. And I think this is the problem where certain aspects of a character get really ingrained in pop culture, and everyone who wants to do it again only latches onto that. And I don't know. I think maybe you have to find like a young, like up and coming comedian who would like really be. I think here's the trick. This is the hard thing because you just said thing about recasting characters, and I'm more notably on the side of like any character can be recast. I know this is where you and I have disagreed sometimes because like I'm all for someone else playing Indiana Jones in the future. You are not so much. And I think,
but I'm hold on. I'm also not a fan of a CGI Harrison Ford.
Oh yeah,
of course. Let me just say that first. I have to.
Yeah. I think the challenge here is if you really did want to do another live action Clouseau movie, you'd have to find someone, and this is going to be tough, who would be willing to just entirely put aside Peter Sellers, and maybe find someone who's like, hey, don't even like watch some of their movies. Like if we just gave you this script, like what would your interpretation of Clouseau be? That would be interesting to me because I do think everyone tries to imitate Peter Sellers now, and that's the problem because he's inimitable. He was a singular force, a singular comedic force.
Well, Trev, you're kind of answering the question that I was going to pose to you, is what you want for this franchise going forward. I know in the early incarnation of this show, we were playing more, with what if or what we want later or how would we change it. And sometimes we don't do that as much as we'd like to. But I think because you're such a huge fan of this franchise, I think I want to pose that question to you primarily, and you've probably given it a lot of thought over the years. But a big question is, if you're gonna move away, you just mentioned you want to move away from a Peter Sellers impression, but I almost think you have to move away from that impression, because is there any slapstick, physical, comedic performers nowadays in 2022, the year of our Lord?
Yeah, it's really like slapstick, that kind of like physical comedy and like what Jim Carrey does, right? Is like really like a thing of the past. That's like why like when Jim Carrey like came back for like the Sonic movies, people were like, "Oh, isn't it great to see?" Like even critics who had like gotten sick of him, right, were like, "Oh, like it's Jim Carrey doing Jim Carrey stuff again." Like that's
totally.
like how charming, because we don't have people doing that anymore. It is interesting actually that Sonic, by the way, I think you're aware that Sonic the Hedgehog's director,
Yes.
Jeff Fowler, is developing like what seems like it might be like the next Pink Panther movie, which at this point is intended to be apparently a live action CGI hybrid with the actual Pink Panther cartoon character again, kind of going up against Clouseau. And I don't know if Clouseau is intended to be live action of that or if they will both be animated.
The cat will be, but the Panther will be voiced by Chris Pratt.
Of course, yes, of course, as is the law. And Chris Pratt will also play Clouseau. And it will now be a Star Wars story. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I can't think of any like physical comedians who like right now that makes sense to me. But I will say, I do have an idea. I want to run it by you. So I was just saying, I would love if a comedian would have the balls to just like put aside the Peter Sellers and just do their own thing with it. And what I was talking about earlier, like what I like about Clouseau, right? So it's not just the physical stuff, but it's that like that arrogance and that confidence despite being a total idiot. And who I think would actually be good, who I'd love to see take a crack at it. And I believe I've mentioned this person in our last episode as well, so it's interesting he keeps going up. But Rhys Darby, I think, would be like a really interesting choice for like a new Clouseau, because I could totally see him being that like, like very, very sure of himself, very full of himself idiot, who's like everyone is like so annoyed by, and he just doesn't realize it. So like that would be my personal casting choice.
Honestly, even Jermaine Clement would be good too. Now that you're bringing up these Flight of the Conchords guys, I mean Taika would be great. I think those guys they do have a certain confidence to their silliness, and I think even if moving away from an impression, I think that the confidence there is where the comedy is, and that has to stay. That has to stay in the performance. So interesting. Yeah, you're right. 2 back-to-back episodes. We're talking about Flight of the Conchords and these guys. We are unoriginal hacks.
We should work for these studios because
MGM, hear us. But yeah, those are great choices. I love my slapstick comedy. I think you know this about me. I love, my... You know what? Leslie Nielsen, if he was alive and, like, younger than looking that age his whole entire life, I think a Leslie Nielsen as a Clouseau, if we were to flash back in time, I like my... As I get older, I'm realizing that David Schwimmer was the best friend in Friends. He was just so good at that physical humor and physical comedy. And again, that I guess maybe he didn't have much confidence, actually, now that I think about it. I'm just rattling off names now. I don't know.
I mean, as another card carrying Ross defender, I'm with you. I like picture him as Clouseau is kind of tough, but I'm with you in that. He has like a underappreciated comedic value to him. So
well, and that's what I'm going for here is that physical comedy I just absolutely love. I've mentioned in episodes before that Jim Carrey, Chris Farley, Mike Myers really were the bedrock to my sensibilities growing up as a youth. So, and that style is gone. That style really is gone. That's why I think I like the Sonic movies. I don't think they're great, but I genuinely like Sonic 1. I think that's very good. I think it's just nice to see Ace Ventura.
So, Chris, I think you alluded, as we wrap up here, I think you alluded to this earlier, but please tell me that this is not going to be the only Pink Panther movie you ever watched. Did doing the research or this discussion at least, I hope that there's a party that's like, you know what, I need to check out one of the good ones now.
Oh yeah, I will do my due diligence after this and in the near future to seek out the good ones. I'll go to your Letterboxd link in your podcast app, by the way, listeners. But I think I'll go look at I think you listed them there, rank them. And I'll watch the good ones. I really liked when you said the later entries just go full fucking bonkers cartoons. And I think that appeals to me more than anything else.
Yeah, I think those are the ones that are going to be in your wheelhouse for sure.
Cool. So yeah, that'll about do it for this discussion. Continuing with Summer Surprise Part 2 on Failure Franchise. Next episode, we are going to be looking at 2018's The Darkest Minds. So I don't know anything about that one.
No,
and then I'm sure I'll have to do some research. But July 19th, after that, we will be flashing back to the 90s to 1991 to watch V.I. Warchowski. Summer Surprise has been cool. It's been, again, as Trev said at the beginning of the episode, we don't know what we're doing. We just throw them in a randomizer. We pick the ones for the summer, and it's fun. I like it.
I mean, we should just, you know what, Chris, we should take a moment here and just enjoy this last little gasp where we're kind of flying under the radar and we're not that famous. Because I imagine the Darkest Minds and V.I. Warchowski episodes are going to move us into a serial level of podcast fame.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
The stratosphere, you say?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Lowest months ever. But please follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. And please rate, review, whatever you do. Go onto your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to right now. Throw us a star rating. And then just honestly join the tribe, hit that subscribe, and you will keep along with us every 2 weeks.
Stick with us because I promise you all, you're going to love what we're doing in the fall.
Yes.
That's a guarantee. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Anyways, well, thanks for listening.
Thanks.